The wind sliced across the surface of Karashir 3, driving a fine, stinging sand into every crevice it could reach. It howled between jagged ridges and rust-colored dunes, carrying with it the scent of scorched metal and ancient dust. Under the pale light of the planet's twin moons, a small human encampment sat nestled against a weather-worn rock face. The outpost was barely more than a mobile lab, its structure braced against the constant gusts. Its lights flickered as the systems worked to maintain power in the hostile environment. Inside the outpost, 3 figures moved with purpose. The mission had stretched for over a week now, part research, part reconnaissance, and tonight they were scheduled to wrap. Lena Darcy, crouched beside a thermal scanner, was cataloging the last samples of microbial life found clinging to a subterranean aquifer. Her brown hair was pulled tight under her suit hood, and a deep frown cut across her face as she reviewed the data. Across from her, Nico Alcock leaned back in a reclined chair, chewing the inside of his cheek while he ran diagnostics on their communication logs. Standing just outside the open bay door was Ewan Souther, Marine, veteran of 3 interstellar campaigns, and the oldest of the crew by at least 2 decades. His silhouette was framed by the white-blue light of the moons, his suit coated in a thin layer of sand. He was silent, watching the wind dance across the dunes. Then the console pinged. A low, uneven chime echoed through the tent. Nico sat forward. "That's not ours." Lena stood. "Signal? Yeah, but it's wrong." Nico's fingers moved quickly across the interface. "Encrypted channel. Alien code but degraded. Fractured. I'm not even sure what species." "Hold on." Ewan stepped inside. "Source?" Nico pointed to a pulsing marker on the screen. 4 clicks east. Dead zone. No known settlements. No registered traffic. Lena squinted at the data. "It's broadcasting on a loop. No identifiers. No timestamp." Ewan bent over the console, watching the signal cycle through again. "Could be old." "It just started, Ewan," Nico muttered. 10 seconds ago. We would have seen it earlier if it were old." A beat of silence passed. "I'll go," Ewan said, straightening. Lena raised an eyebrow. "Alone?" He was already walking toward the equipment rack. "It's a scout run. Just me and the pod." Nico smirked. "You sure you're not too old for this crap?" Ewan paused, securing the last strap on his chest harness. Then he gave a half smile. "You know what they say about an old Marine. He's old for a reason." Nico laughed. Lena didn't. She just watched him climb into the compact reconnaissance pod and seal the hatch. The engines flared to life, a low hum rising as the vehicle lifted into the air and banked eastward, vanishing into the storm-lit dark. The terrain grew more hostile as Ewan pushed the pod through the wind-carved canyons. Scanning arrays blinked against the interference, struggling to maintain clarity. The distress signal grew stronger with each kilometer, its rhythm erratic, like a heartbeat out of sync. There was no standard encoding, no digital handshake. Whatever had sent it was barely holding itself together. He crested a ridge, and the world dropped away below him. The valley had been obliterated. Burn marks streaked across the dunes, stretching for hundreds of meters. Craters pocked the earth where weapons had torn through the surface. What was once a landing site, or maybe a forward outpost, had been reduced to blackened wreckage. Shattered hulls jutted from the sand like broken teeth. Twisted metal, chunks of plating, and shattered pylons lay scattered as if a storm of fire had swept the area and left nothing alive in its wake. Ewan didn't speak. He just adjusted his sensors and followed the pulsing signal deeper into the graveyard. He slowed the pod near a rise of rock where the reading spiked. Setting the craft down, he stepped out into the cold, crunching across glassy sand toward a mound of collapsed stone and steel. Something under the debris gleamed. Barely. He knelt, brushing it clean. A reinforced hatch, half crushed but intact, and beneath it, a faint bio-signature. He keyed his mic. Found a bunker, mostly buried, reading multiple life forms, weak but alive. Static hissed for a second. Then Lena. "We're on our way." Ewan marked the coordinates and activated a flare beacon. Then he began clearing debris by hand, working methodically, ignoring the ache in his shoulders. Every plate of metal shifted revealed more of the bunker. Whoever had been here had tried to lock themselves in. Whoever attacked had tried to erase them. 15 minutes later, the shuttle skimmed over the ridge, kicking up a storm of sand as it touched down. Nico disembarked first, scanning the perimeter. Lena followed, immediately moving toward the hatch with a medkit in hand. "They're alive," she confirmed, kneeling beside a thermal vent. "Barely. Probably on backup oxygen." Nico attached a magnetic jack to the hatch and began burning through the lock. Sparks danced as the tool hissed and sliced through the metal. With a groan, the hatch gave way. Ewan dropped in first. The darkness inside was suffocating, broken only by the flicker of emergency lighting and the beam of his helmet lamp. The room was cramped, its walls scorched by heat and smoke. 6 figures lay slumped along the far wall, their bodies limp and unmoving. He moved closer. Long limbs, a bioluminescent sheen to their skin. Their facial features were smooth and elongated, framed by backward-sweeping crests and jawlines that tapered into thin slits. Their skin tone ranged from pale silver to deep violet, and their clothing bore a military structure, but torn, singed, and half-melted. One stirred as Lena entered behind him. The alien flinched at the light but didn't resist as she began scanning. Another let out a sharp cough, turning his head weakly. Ewan leaned down. "We're here to help." The alien blinked. Its eyes were vertical slits, pupils dilated. "You're human." "Yeah. Welcome back from the edge." Lena began stabilizing the worst injuries as Nico patched the internal environment. Several of the aliens were unconscious. One, older, with a jagged scar across his crest, attempted to sit up but collapsed again. Outside, the ship's AI crackled over the comms. "Commander, proximity alert. Unidentified vessels inbound. 6 contacts. Trajectory intersects current position." Ewan's head snapped toward Nico. "You send anything out?" "No." Lena didn't look up. "Neither did I." Then a voice rasped from behind them. An alien, barely conscious, wheezed, "They must have picked up the signal." Another, more alert, turned to the display as Nico pulled it up. His face went slack with horror. 6 ships, Nico said. 2 minutes to horizon. The alien's voice was hollow. "That's them. They came back." The room fell into a frozen silence, broken only by the faint hum of failing life support. Ewan's jaw clenched. He stepped back into the corridor and looked up at the streaks in the sky, light glinting off distant hulls. He spoke into the comm, voice steady but sharp. "We're moving. All of us. Now." The ramp slammed shut behind the last of the survivors. The engines roared to life, blasting sand and ash into the air as the human dropship lifted from the scorched basin of Karashir 3. Ewan Souther gripped the controls, fingers flying across the console as the ship angled sharply away from the rising horizon. "They're accelerating," Nico shouted from the system station. 5 ships locking onto us, 1 holding back. "Make that 6, Lena called out, strapping in beside a stretcher where one of the injured aliens was moaning weakly. "We're not outrunning them like this." The alien beside her had blue-tinted skin and a narrow face lined with small sensory ridges. His breathing was shallow, and a greenish fluid seeped from a gash near his collarbone. His name, what little they could make out, was Virel, and he was the only one of the group still coherent enough to speak. "They will not stop," Virel murmured. "They finish what they start." Ewan banked the ship hard right, bringing them below a canyon ridge. The hull vibrated as atmospheric resistance pushed back, warning lights flaring across the dash. "No cloaking, minimal shielding. We're flying naked," Nico muttered. "They've got speed on us," Ewan said, jaw tight. "Keep those rear stabilizers green or we're done." He shoved the throttle forward, and the dropship screamed across the canyons, kicking up massive trails of sand in its wake. Behind them, a formation of 6 dark ships broke through the clouds, sleek and angular. The lead vessel opened fire, red plasma bolts hammering the rocks just meters from their tail. Alarms shrieked. "Rear deflectors at 30%, Nico snapped. "We take another hit like that, and we're toast." "Get me a line to Otto," Ewan growled. "Working on it." Another blast rocked the ship. Panels above them flickered, and a sharp crack split across the viewport's top corner. Lena gripped the side rail as she stabilized Varel with a field injector. "Vitals are dropping. He won't survive a crash." "Not crashing," Ewan muttered. "Not yet." Nico turned in his seat. "Comms up." Ewan hit the channel. "Needham, this is Souther. We're under pursuit. Hostile vessels, 6 total. Ship IDs match standard Alliance attack patterns. I've seen this formation before. We need immediate support." The voice of Admiral Otto Needham cut through the static, stern and clipped. "Repeat, 6 hostiles? Confirm formation." "Confirmed. I'm transmitting visuals now. We're compromised. Can't jump. They hit our long-range core." Nico grimaced. "Engines are fluctuating. We've got maybe 1 short-range pulse left before the whole system gives out." Needham's voice sharpened. "Hold position. I'm scrambling reinforcements. Transmit exact coordinate." The comm line shrieked as another impact slammed into the aft section. The entire ship jerked sideways. Lights went dead for a heartbeat, then flickered back in emergency red. A screen exploded behind Nico, showering him with sparks. He hissed and ducked. "Main comm is down!" Nico shouted. "We've lost the uplink." "I noticed," Ewan barked. "Where's my backup nav?" "Dead. Sensors are blind past 6 clicks." Another shot raked their tail. The engine shrieked. "Starboard reactor just blew a capacitor," Nico shouted. "We're bleeding fuel." "Divert power to forward shields," Ewan ordered. "Get ready for evasive." In the medbay section, Lena gritted her teeth, leaning over Varel. The alien skin was losing its glow. She pressed a stim injector against his chest. He convulsed, gasped, and his eyes snapped open. "Listen to me," she said. "If you know somewhere, anywhere we can go, now's the time." Varel's head rolled to the side. "Varel on. Outpost. Not far. Trade node. Protected." Lena keyed into the local star chart. "Nico, he's talking about an outpost 2 jumps east. Coordinates locked, but we'll need microbursts to get there." "I can give you 1 burst," Nico shouted back. "Maybe." "Punch it," Ewan said. "We make that jump or we're space dust." Nico routed everything to the core. The ship groaned under the strain, and the bulkheads shuddered as the last of the drive's capacity surged forward. "Jumping in 3, 2... The enemy fire intensified. Another barrage scorched their hull, 1 shot slicing through the starboard wing. The ship lurched violently. "1!" Space twisted. The stars stretched, bent, and then snapped back into focus. The dropship tumbled into subspace, bleeding energy and leaving a distorted trail in its wake. For a full second, everything was silent, except for the groaning of metal and the labored breaths of the crew. Then alarms flared again. "We made it," Nico said. "But the engines are shot. We won't be doing that again." "They're still tracking us," Ewan said. "If they've got subspace relays, they're already plotting an intercept." Lena leaned over to Ewan's chair. "The outpost. Virelon. If what Varel said is true, they might help. But we're not going to win their trust coming in like this." "We're not coming in quiet," Ewan muttered. "Not an option." Behind them, Varel coughed again. "They will chase. They want no witnesses, no stories left to tell." Ewan didn't answer. He adjusted course, locking on the nearest safe vector to Virelon. "They'll have to settle for us," he said. "Let's see if they're brave enough to finish the job face to face." The dropship surged forward, scarred, half-functioning, but still flying. In its hold lay the evidence of something bigger than any of them had anticipated. And somewhere beyond the next star, something darker was already closing in. The station loomed ahead. Virelon, a modular outpost built into the orbit of a cold gas giant, wrapped in a thin veil of ionized dust. Its structure was blunt and utilitarian, rows of docking arms extending like skeletal limbs, weapon systems embedded in the hull like dormant claws. Ewan's dropship bucked again, warning lights strobing across the dash. Behind him, smoke curled from a ruptured panel, the faint tang of burning insulation creeping into the cockpit. "That's it," Nico grunted from the system station. "Engines are at 30% and falling. One more surge and we'll lose attitude control." "Noted," Ewan replied. "We're coming in hot, like it or not." In the medbay, Lena secured the last of the wounded. Virel, barely conscious, clutched the side of the stretcher as the ship pitched slightly. The lights flickered again. On the main channel, Ewan opened a direct hail. "Virel on station. This is Commander Ewan Souther, Terran Recon Team. We are requesting emergency dock clearance. We're carrying critical survivors from a colony attacked by unknown forces. Pursuit is imminent. Acknowledge." A beat of silence. Then a voice crackled through, low and hostile. "This is Commander Durell of Virelon. Your vessel is unidentified. Stand down and prepare for scan." "Copy," Ewan said through gritted teeth. He cut speed to minimum drift, shields flickering. "They're locking targeting arrays," Nico warned. "We're not dead yet," Ewan replied. "Let the alien do his job." The comm opened again, this time with a harsh tone. "Your ship shows signs of battle. No registry match. Explain yourselves, or we will engage defensive protocols." From the medbay, Virel rasped, "Patch me through." Lena tapped into the console. The translator sputtered for a moment, then relayed his voice. "This is Virel Koras, 4th Cycle Coordinator of the Shardari Envoy. We were attacked. Survivors only. Humans saved us. The threat follows." Silence again. Then a different voice, colder, older, cautious. "Koras, you were listed as deceased. The Shardari convoy was destroyed. All hands lost." "They tried," Virel coughed. "We lived." A long pause. Then static gave way to muffled discussion in a language their translators struggled to pass. Finally, Durell's voice returned. "Hold position. Do not approach further. Await clearance." "They're stalling," Nico said. "They're scared," Ewan countered. "And they should be." On the forward screen, a new alert flashed. Nico's eyes widened. "They're here." 6 vessels tore out of hyperspace like black knives, slicing into real space behind the dropship. Their hulls shimmered with heat, engines flaring like a swarm of predators closing in. The lead ship, narrow and angular, banked hard toward Virelon without hesitation. "Target locks reactivating, hostiles incoming." "Station's not opening the gate," Ewan said, fists tightening on the control yoke. "We're stuck in the kill box." Inside the station's command center, Commander Durell stood over the central interface, a high-collared uniform draped across his thin frame. He was a Sarin, pale skin stretched over elongated features, with wide, pupilless eyes that shimmered green. Beside him, Sub-Commander Talon, a younger Aryan officer with translucent skin and flaring gill-like slits along his jawline, adjusted the weapon systems. "They weren't lying," Talon said. "Those ships match the specs of Alliance-pattern assault cruisers." "Or someone wants us to think so," Durell murmured. "Prepare defense grid, but do not engage, not yet." Another hail came through. The human vessel again. "This is Souther. We are under fire. I repeat, we are under fire. We are escorting survivors from an attempted extermination of a neutral envoy. We need immediate clearance, or we will be destroyed." Still, Durell hesitated. He glanced toward the tactical readout. The Shardari colony had vanished from Alliance records 3 days ago. The coordinates were sealed. No recovery, no inquiry. And now this. Humans arriving from that exact sector, chased by ghost ships. The data didn't make sense. Unless... Talon stepped forward. "Sir, we either let them in, or we become the next incident." Durell's jaw tightened. "Activate perimeter shields. Bring the guns online. Prepare to cover their approach. Give them a corridor, but don't drop the dock shields yet. Outside, the human ship twisted hard, avoiding a fresh volley of plasma. One of the pursuers clipped their port stabilizer. Metal screamed as the structure bent and threw off orientation. "They're trying to hurt us away from the station," Nico barked. Ewan turned the ship toward the defensive perimeter. "Virelon, if you're going to help, now's the time." "Corridor active," came the terse reply. "Follow the beacon. Weapons will engage in 5 seconds." Lena held onto the bulkhead as the ship rocked again. "This thing's coming apart. Then we go down fighting," Ewan growled. Durrell gave the final order. "Fire!" Turrets on the station lit up, hurling precise bolts into the void. The nearest enemy ship veered sharply, its shields flaring as the barrage connected. Another dove through the arc, returning fire. Explosions flared between the station and the dropship as the battle erupted. The human's vessel skimmed past a blast wave, rotating to bring its remaining guns to bear. Nico activated the forward cannons. "Returning fire!" Twin bursts lanced out, striking one of the attackers dead on. The hostile ship rolled in space, hull breaching in 3 places before it broke apart. "Took one down," Nico confirmed. 4 still closing. 1's hanging back. "They're watching how we respond," Ewan muttered. "Feels like recon doctrine." "Talon, Grid 7, reinforce shields," Durrell snapped. "Deploy drone swarm, force separation." Spherical drones launched from the station's underbelly, swarming toward the nearest attackers. The alien ships shifted formation, trying to compensate. In the medbay, Lena knelt beside Virel, who was watching the flicker of the battle on a screen above. "They will not stop," he said again, "not until there is silence." Outside, the battle raged across the flanks of Virelon. The human's dropship, smoking and damaged, fired its last volley before the weapons systems overloaded. Ewan spun the ship and began a decaying spiral toward the upper docking layer. "Dock doors are cycling open," Nico reported. "We're clear for entry." Ewan didn't speak. He just guided the ship forward, every system screaming in protest. Inside the command deck, Durrell watched the human vessel limp toward them, scars scored deep across its hull. He finally spoke, voice low. "This wasn't random," he said. "This was a cleanup." Talon's gaze flicked to the tactical map. "Then we'll hold the line." The human ship slid into the bay as another wave of fire lit the void behind it. The station trembled, its defense systems roaring to life. And outside, the dark ships regrouped, their formation shifting again. The battle was far from over. A plasma barrage shattered across the outer defense grid of Virelon Station, forcing the entire structure into a low tremor that echoed through its core supports. Red light bathed the corridors. Alarms wailed through every deck. Outside, in the pitch of vacuum, the battle pressed forward, faster, more coordinated, and sharper than the defenders had anticipated. From the upper docking platform, Ewan Souther stood at the edge of the reinforced viewplate, watching as another of the enemy ships swung into attack position. Twin lances of violet plasma cut through the black, skimming Virelon's shielded flanks. "Shields down 21% in Quadrant 4, reported Subcommander Talon, his hands a blur over the tactical interface. "Auto turrets are holding line formation, but their fire patterns are adapting." "Too fast," Ewan muttered. "They're using real-time feedback loops. This isn't a smash-and-burn hit job. It's coordinated." Across the room, Commander Durrell paced slowly behind the command chair, his pale skin gleaming with the soft bioluminescence of his species. His gaze remained fixed on the movement of the enemy formation on the main display. "They're pushing toward our primary heat exchangers," he said quietly. "They want to force the shields into overload." Nico Alcock stormed into the command center. Datapad in hand, sweat streaked across his forehead, despite the chill of the station's emergency climate settings. "We just finished a first pass on one of the wrecks," he said, breathless. "Took some of their debris into engineering." Drell didn't look away from the screen. "You're salvaging in the middle of a siege. You'll want to hear this," Nico snapped, and turned to Ewan. It's not black market, not pirate tech. The wreck's internal panels still have registry tags, alliance tags. Ewan stepped closer, voice low. You sure? Not old, not recycled. Official manufacturing codes. And this? Nico tapped the screen, enlarging a series of serials and production markers. This comes from a fleet depot on Narsalon, human territory. Durrell turned slowly. You're saying the attackers are using Alliance-built ships? Lena entered behind Nico, holding a blackened shard of composite armor, a faint silver insignia still visible under the soot. I ran an imprint scan on the plating. Energy burns don't match known alien plasma signatures. These ships weren't just bought from the Alliance, she said. They were assigned. Ewan didn't flinch. They're ours. Outside, another blast rocked the station. Talon called out, Deck 6 power grid is collapsing. We've got a gap in the eastern shield band. Shift the drone swarm. Cover that hole now, Durrell ordered. But Ewan had already moved. He dropped into the ops console beside Talon and brought up the station's heat mapping. They're triangulating weak points based on shield bleed. It's patterned, repeating every 40 seconds. They're mapping it like a hunting grid. Talon blinked. You mean they're using pulse timing to sync the drops in field strength? They're trained for this, Ewan said. We break their pattern. We break the siege. Durrell narrowed his eyes. How? Feed them false decay signatures, Nico said, catching on immediately. Make it look like the eastern band's going to fail again, then overcharge it and collapse the western corridor instead. It'll lure them into the dead zone. Trap them, Durrell finished. Talon adjusted the systems. We'll need exact timing. Ewan rolled his shoulders. You've got 5 minutes. Outside the station, the attackers shifted, cutting wide arcs around the drone perimeter. The lead ship, a matte black Predator vessel with deep blue thrusters, swept in, targeting the same zone where Virelon's shielding had dipped. The humans' plan played out silently. As the lead vessel fired, the station's eastern shields buckled visibly, then snapped back to full power, flaring white. At the same time, the western shield dropped entirely. Too late, the enemy ships realized the trap. 3 of them surged into the corridor and met a wall of directed kinetic artillery fire, synced from Virelon's upper deck and reconfigured by Nico's manual overrides. The first ship disintegrated in a burst of fire and shrapnel. The second was clipped at the engines, spiraling out of control. The third tried to retreat, but Ewan, now in the tactical chair, rerouted one of the drone swarms directly into its path. It vanished in an explosion that left nothing but wreckage and boiling vapor. On the station deck, cheers broke out among the defenders. Ewan didn't speak. He turned instead toward the engineering display, now showing data from the disabled ship spinning in orbit. Lena's voice came through the channel. She and 2 of Durrell's engineers had managed to dock with the derelict. There's a core alive in here, she said. It's damaged, but I think I can get a full pull on its targeting logs. Nico was already working on a second wreck. I've got a weapons relay still transmitting. These fire controls, they're tied to Alliance fire pattern protocols. No one outside High Fleet training should have access to these. Get everything you can, Ewan ordered. We need names, connections, proof. An hour later, in the debriefing chamber deep inside Virelon, the surviving leaders gathered. Durrell stood with arms crossed, watching the projection of the extracted logs play in silence. Alliance fleet tags, deployment orders with partial redactions, fire control signatures matching Alliance Navy structures. This isn't rogue, he said finally. This is sanctioned. Someone wanted that envoy dead and scrubbed the records. You arriving in time. That wasn't supposed to happen. Ewan stepped forward, gaze fixed. No, it wasn't. Behind him, Nico nodded. They tried to erase it, but they didn't count on us hearing the call. Durrell turned to them. You understand what this means? We do, Ewan said. He keyed into the long-range comm relay, opening a link on emergency channels. Patch me through to Admiral Otto Needham. Priority override, Alpha Green. After a tense moment, static gave way to the sharp voice of the Admiral. Souther, I've been trying to reach you. Ewan's voice was calm, but hard. "Admiral, we have a problem bigger than you imagined." Behind him, the shattered wreckage of 3 black ships floated in silence, drifting in the wake of a lie no longer hidden. Ewan stepped out of the command center, data tablet in hand, boots echoing down the metal corridor as the weight of what they'd uncovered settled like stone across his shoulders. Behind him, the projected logs still cycled, alliance markings, encrypted orders, the shattered pretense of neutrality. He rounded the corner into the auxiliary comms room and keyed into the long-range relay himself. The interface flickered as deep space encryption protocols kicked in. He didn't wait for a secure channel. He opened the line wide. "Admiral Needham, this is Commander Ewan Souther. Priority code Black Echo. We have visual confirmation and registry match of Alliance-based hardware used in an unprovoked assault on an Allied envoy. Survivors recovered. Debris analyzed. This wasn't a rogue cell. This was authorized." There was a pause, just long enough to hint at shock on the other end. Then the Admiral's voice came through, graveled and clipped. "Repeat that last, Souther." "You heard me, sir. Clean tags, directive encryption. Orders were issued to someone inside the command structure." Silence again. Then, "Transmit all recovered data immediately. I'll have High Council security decrypt it while you're in transit. You need to return. Now. We're prepping the ship. Engine repairs are underway. Move fast. If what you're saying is true, this goes all the way up." Ewan glanced at the display showing orbital debris still spinning outside the station. "That's what I'm afraid of." He cut the comm. The room fell quiet except for the hum of systems rerouting power back to the hangars. Then every console lit up in red. Lena's voice burst over the internal channel. "Command, we've got incoming." Ewan was already sprinting back toward the control deck. Inside, the tactical displays were erupting with data. Talon stood frozen for a second, reading the sensor feed. Lena had both hands braced on the console, eyes wide. This can't be right," she said, voice hollow. "I'm reading multiple signatures, a full hyperspace wave." Nico looked over from a terminal. "How many?" Lena hesitated, then spoke the word like a sentence. "Too many." The display updated with a pulsing grid of red icons blinking into formation on the outer system boundary. 15 vessels, Talon said slowly. "Wait, 17? No, 20. They're still dropping in." Ewan stepped in, voice flat. "Deploy all defensive batteries. Get the drones back in rotation. Bring the lower deck gun towers online and reroute all auxiliary power to the main shield array." Commander Durrell appeared from the far end of the chamber, his robe trailing behind his long frame. His face was unreadable. They came in on the dark axis, used the planetary shadow to hide their advance. "We didn't even register the hyperfield until they were already inside the margin." "They planned this," Nico said quietly. "They waited for us to exhaust the station. This is a killing strike." Ewan moved to the front console and activated a comm line. "Admiral Needham, we have a second wave incoming. Multiple capital-class vessels. We're heavily outgunned and the station is barely standing. If reinforcements don't arrive soon, we're not walking out of here." Needham's voice was immediate, hard as steel. "I'm reading your data now. Coordinates confirmed. Radamanthi's battle group is mobilizing. You hold the line, Souther. No matter what. Help is coming." Then the line went dead. Ewan stood in silence for a moment. He didn't blink. Lena stepped forward, her voice low. "There's no way we hold this place if they commit their full fleet. Then we make them bleed for every meter." He turned to Talon. "I'm taking the ship. Get the engines patched. We'll pull the forward line and give the station time to reconfigure its inner defenses." "You won't make it 2 minutes out there alone," Talon snapped. "I don't need 2 minutes," Ewan said, already walking. "I just need to keep them busy long enough for backup to drop." The hangar lit up under emergency lighting. Techs scrambled to secure panels and connect final feeds as Ewan entered the human craft, sealing the cockpit behind him. The console flickered, systems running on jury-rigged subroutines, damage alerts across 3 sections, but the engines were stable, and the weapons still worked. He powered up the thrusters. Outside, the second fleet broke formation. A wall of ships, dark, lean, and curved like predatory beasts, spread across the orbital horizon. Plasma fields began to charge. "Brace for impact," Durrell said from the command deck. "They're targeting the outer pylons first." Ewan's ship screamed out of the hangar bay, thrusters flaring as he pushed to intercept. Behind him, Virelon's shields lit with impact after impact. The outer ring of defense crumbled. Explosions rippled along the spine of the station's docking arms. Inside, Lena grabbed a railing as the deck pitched. "Multiple hull breaches on the lower decks," she called. "We've lost grav stabilizers in 3 sections." Nico's voice crackled through the internal comm. "We've got fires in the server block and auxiliary life support is out. If the next hit cuts main power, we lose the shield matrix entirely." Outside, Ewan's ship danced between volleys, skimming between gun arcs, targeting the lead vessel. He launched a pair of torpedoes that struck the enemy's starboard engines, causing the ship to bank violently and drift off course. Another barrage caught his port side, tearing through armor plating. The hull screamed as the ship spun end over end before Ewan stabilized it. Blood smeared down the side of his temple. Back inside the station, the command center dimmed. A support beam cracked, the main viewport spider-webbed with fractures. "Impact across main struts," Talon shouted. "If we take another wave at that magnitude, we'll lose central structure." Lena gripped the console, sweat on her brow. "Where the hell are the reinforcements?" Then, through the static and chaos, a new signal blinked to life on the comm panel. A broad-frequency hail. A voice, calm and deep, cut through the noise. "This is Captain Frank Curry of the Radamanthes. Hold your position." Ewan's heart slammed in his chest as the stars ahead bent again. Help has arrived. The sky was fire. Ewan's ship bucked hard as another wave of plasma strikes raked across the battlefield. Warnings howled in his ears. Inside the cracked canopy, red lights pulsed against the backdrop of stars now crawling with enemy vessels. His console screamed under the load. Coolant pressure failing, heat thresholds exceeded, port thruster unresponsive. The hull groaned like a dying animal. The defenders of Virelon were breaking. Below him, the station reeled. Deck 7 was gone, split open by a direct hit that had torn one of the outer docking spires clean from its moorings. Gouts of flame and atmosphere jetted from open wounds in the station's armor. Defense turrets, once precise and formidable, now sputtered or lay dormant, silenced by targeted EMP bursts. Ewan banked hard to the left, cutting across the path of an incoming bomber, sleek and obsidian, its ventral bay glowing with the charge of a payload delivery. He fired twin disruptor bursts. One shot clipped its wing, and the other slammed straight through the bomber's core. It spiraled and exploded, taking another drone cluster with it. Still breathing, Ewan muttered through bloodied teeth, but his eyes flicked constantly to the damage readouts. The ship wouldn't hold. In the command center of Virelon, Commander Durrell braced against a shattered console. He had taken a gash across his side, violet blood soaked into the hem of his robe. But he stood. Subcommander Talon barked orders across the remaining functional comm lines, trying to re-establish coordination with what few drone swarms still responded. "They're cutting through the west perimeter," Talon shouted. "We've lost half the outer ring." "They're not breaching," Durrell growled. "They're carving us apart piece by piece." Ewan's voice crackled through the open comm. "I'm in orbit. The next wave is forming up. They're pushing for a mass strike, coordinated. You've got minutes." Lena, in the remains of the medbay, knelt beside one of the Shardari survivors, a young female with a torn crest and a splintered leg, unconscious from blood loss. Another explosion rocked the deck. Pipes burst above her, spraying coolant across the wall. "We can't hold them," she whispered. "We won't survive the next pass." The sensors inside Ewan's ship lit up with another flood of contacts, no longer approaching, but diving into final attack vectors. "This is it," he muttered. They're going for the kill. He pushed the throttle. The ship responded with a groan, one engine coughing, but enough. He dove straight at the lead strike craft, a one-man wedge thrown into the mouth of a coordinated onslaught. He fired again and again, targeting guidance nodes, ventral plates, exposed thruster pods. He took out one, then another. But 3 more replaced them. Inside the cockpit, heat warnings blared, smoke pouring from a panel. The comms stuttered and then hissed to life. A voice, calm, heavy with command. "This is Captain Frank Curry of the Rhadamanthes." The stars split open behind the enemy fleet. A hyperlane breach tore through space like a knife through fabric. First 1, then 2, then a dozen human ships erupted from subspace. At their center, the Rhadamanthes, a Juggernaut-class warship plated in gunmetal and scarlet, unleashed its payload mid-emergence. Curry's voice continued without pause. "Let's end this." The Rhadamanthes's spinal gun came online and fired in one continuous beam, cutting through 2 enemy frigates as if they were made of mist. Flanking destroyers peeled off, loosing volley after volley of torpedoes into the hostile formation. A battleship on the edge of the enemy vanguard tried to maneuver out of range. Too slow. It caught 3 blasts amidships and shattered, debris spinning out in all directions. Ewan blinked against the sudden brightness. Explosions bloomed around him like red stars going nova. The tide turned in seconds. What had been a slow bleed now reversed. Enemy ships that had methodically advanced for hours suddenly broke ranks. Some turned to flee, others tried to regroup, but the Rhadamanthes's fleet was already upon them. Human fighters danced between debris fields, executing tight, brutal formations that ripped into the enemy from angles they couldn't predict. Inside Viraillon, the lights flickered back to life. Shield matrices rebooted. Talon looked up at the sensor displays with disbelief. "They're retreating," he said. "They're breaking off." Durrell didn't speak. He simply watched, a quiet exhale escaping his lips. Lena stood shakily as the walls stopped shaking. Behind her, the wounded Shardari girl stirred for the first time in hours. Ewan pulled back from the conflict zone, his ship trailing vapor and sparks. A low beep echoed from the comms panel. He accepted the call. "Souther," Curry's voice said. "You still breathing?" "Alive for now." "Good. Fall back to Viraillon. We're holding position until we can confirm the area's clear. No one's touching that station again." Ewan leaned back in the pilot's seat, eyes scanning the wreckage field now drifting in every direction. Enemy craft, broken and silent, spun slowly through the dark, silent testaments to the fury that had just passed. He looked toward the silhouette of the Rhadamanthes, backlit by distant starlight and punctuated by faint glows of repair drones already weaving around its hull. And then he guided the crippled ship back toward the station, toward the survivors, toward the truth that now had a fleet behind it. The bay doors sealed behind Ewan's battered dropship with a final hiss of pressure equalization. Sparks crackled from a rupture near the port wing as hydraulic systems groaned back into position. The craft had held together long enough to bring him home. Barely. Inside Viraillon's hangar, tech crews rushed forward, guided by flashing indicators and shouted orders. Smoke billowed from the side vents as coolant hissed across the floor. Ewan unstrapped, the back of his flight suit scorched and streaked with dried blood. He stepped out into the chaos without waiting for assistance. "Ewan!" Nico's voice cut through the noise, shouting over the clang of repair tools and fire suppression systems. He jogged over, a grease-stained datapad tucked under one arm. "Took you long enough." Ewan gave a tight nod. "What's the status?" "Ship's totaled, but the core's intact. We can pull the flight data, sync it with the logs we've got from the wrecks. It'll back everything up." Lena appeared next, her expression grim but composed. Her gloves were stained with Shardari blood, and a data pack was clipped to her belt, blinking with a soft green pulse. All survivors stabilized, and I ran redundancy encrypts on the evidence. 3 copies, 3 locations. Ewan glanced around the hangar. Makeshift triage stations lined the far wall, with medical drones and field medics working over injured defenders. Among them, Shardari civilians, their tall, smooth forms draped in emergency blankets, watched in silence. Some clutched one another. Others stared at nothing. Above, the Rhadamanthes hung like a silent guardian, flanked by the remaining vessels of its strike group. They held position around Virelon in a defensive lattice, guns trained outward, waiting. Commander Durrell entered the hangar flanked by 2 security aides. The Sarin leader moved slowly, the wound on his side now wrapped in a crude field dressing, his pale face drawn but resolute. He crossed the hangar without a word, eyes locked on the transparent ceiling above. A ripple of light broke through the void as 3 more ships dropped from hyperspace, cruisers bearing the crest of the Telcon assembly, allies to the Shardari. Their arrival cast a pale shimmer over the deck as their running lights passed overhead. Durrell let out a long breath. "Our reinforcements have arrived." Ewan followed his gaze. "Too late for the dead." "Not for what comes next," Durrell said, his voice barely audible. He turned to face Ewan fully. "I reviewed your logs. The Council will not be able to ignore this." "They'll try," Ewan replied, "but we won't let them." Nico stepped between them. "The Rhadamanthes' comm array is relaying a secure corridor. We can be in Council space in 4 hours with a clear line through friendly sectors." "Then we move now," Ewan said. "I want us off this station before anyone starts spinning this another way." Lena nodded. "We've already uploaded our records to the ship. Everything we have, ship IDs, serial numbers, audio logs, Virel's testimony, combat data, it's all cataloged." They turned together, moving toward the repaired auxiliary shuttle that had been hastily prepped for their departure. It wasn't armored like the dropship, but it was faster, sleeker, made for transport, not war. Durrell stopped just short of the ramp. "Souther," Ewan turned back. "If what you carry brings the truth to light, then the cost here won't be in vain." Ewan looked toward the rows of wounded along the wall. His jaw tightened. "We'll make sure it counts." He climbed into the shuttle. Nico followed, sliding into the system seat, fingers already dancing across the console. Lena took the co-pilot station, running atmospheric control and engine diagnostics. Outside, the last of the Shardari survivors stood along the hangar wall, their long figures still and silent, watching the human shuttle prepare to launch. Among them, Virel leaned on a support frame, eyes fixed on the departing ship. Inside, the cabin sealed. Engines thrummed to life. From the Rhadamanthes, a transmission clicked on. Captain Frank Curry's voice, steady and clipped. "You're clear for departure. We'll maintain overwatch until the next wave arrives." Ewan responded calmly. "Acknowledge. Tell them to keep their guns ready." The shuttle lifted from the deck. The hangar doors opened once again, revealing the scorched edge of Virelon and the field of drifting wreckage beyond. As they passed through the shield envelope and ascended into clean orbit, the full scale of the battle was visible. A debris field stretching for kilometers, torn vessels and fragments of what had once been an overwhelming force now silent and still. Ewan stared at it through the viewport, arms crossed. "We've got everything?" he asked without turning. "All of it," Nico confirmed. "There's no version of this where they claim we imagined it," Lena added quietly. "There's just the question of whether they'll listen." Ewan said nothing for a long moment. Then finally, "They'll listen. Or they'll answer for it." Ahead, the stars twisted as the shuttle entered the jump corridor. The Rhadamanthes shrank behind them, a last guardian holding the line. Their next destination, the heart of the Alliance, and whatever waited for them on the other side. The shuttle broke from subspace with a silent ripple, slicing into the orbit of Alcan 7, core world of the Alliance, seat of the Galactic Council, and the coldest political engine in known space. Below them, the planet glittered with sprawling towers of crystal and chrome, each spire piercing layers of mist and atmosphere like blades angled toward the void. Ewan stood behind the cockpit, arms crossed, his expression hard and unreadable. Nico piloted the vessel through the dense air lanes, passing patrol cruisers and escort ships that didn't bother to hide their scans. The Radamanthes had arranged their clearance through secure diplomatic channels, but that didn't stop the attention. Everyone knew they were coming. Lena sat quietly behind the command station, reviewing the transfer logs again, packet by packet. The evidence was irrefutable. But she looked like a woman reviewing it not for accuracy, but for armor. The voice of Admiral Otto Needham came through the channel as they approached Descent Corridor 9. "You're clear to land. Security detail will meet you at Platform A. I'll join you at the outer rotunda. Stenholm's already inside." "Copy that," Nico said flatly. The shuttle angled downward and descended through the heavy atmosphere. The landing was smooth, but the silence that followed was not. They stepped onto the platform and were met by 2 rows of honor guard troopers in matte gray armor. Their weapons were slung but powered. Between them stood Admiral Needham, shoulders squared, his expression as severe as Ewan had ever seen it. Beside him was Chancellor Chadwick Stenholm, a tall, clean-shaven man with sharp, angular features and eyes like polished obsidian. His dark overcoat bore no insignia, but everyone on the landing pad knew who he was. Stenholm offered no greeting. He simply turned and gestured toward the towering archway that led to the council hall. They moved in silence. The interior of the council was colder than Ewan remembered. Towering stonework framed the space in quiet authority. At the center, the massive chamber opened like a hollow sphere, tiered balconies rising in circles, each platform occupied by representatives of species from across the Alliance. Some were towering and reptilian, like the militarized Karta whose armor glinted with faint biolight. Others, like the velvety-skinned Anathi, sat motionless in sculpted pods. The insectoid Makari clicked in soft intervals while the glass-skinned Avarari blinked translucent eyelids over glowing eyes. Every species had a place, and every place was watching. The 3 humans stopped on the central floor, facing upward toward the primary dais. Elevated above them, surrounded by luminescent glyphs and draped in holographic projection systems. At the center sat the president of the council, a tall, 4-eyed Vasari named Ren Talex, his skin pale bronze, his robe stitched with the star patterns of each founding member. He leaned slightly forward, hands folded, face neutral. Chancellor Stenholm stepped into the presentation circle and keyed a single command into the interface. The lights dimmed. Data began to flow. First came the communications intercepts. Fragmented signals, rerouted orders, encrypted pulses triangulated to known Alliance command structures. A voice command, digitally scrubbed, but with speech patterns matched to Fleet Admiral Horvin Relk, ordering cleansing protocols on a Shardari convoy under the guise of a training maneuver. Then the weapon tags, serial numbers pulled from destroyed hulls, matched to a production batch cleared for special operations 3 months prior. Each code authenticated, each trace linked to a logistics division under Alliance Central Command. Then came the testimony. Holograms of Virel Chorus and other survivors recorded inside Virelon's infirmary, their voices shaking but steady. They did not speak. They simply opened fire. There were no warnings, no identification. We were listed as dead before the attack even began. Each piece of data hung in the air, projected above the chamber, proof, rotating slowly like a blade waiting to fall. Silence followed. Not confusion, not outrage. Silence. Some representatives shifted in their seats. Others remained perfectly still. The Avarari delegation whispered softly among themselves, their words muffled by their rebreather units. A Karta delegate crossed his arms, his eyes narrowed, unreadable. But no one moved to speak. No one questioned the data. No one denied what they were seeing. Ewan felt it first, the weight of it, not guilt, not shame, but calculation. He took a step forward. "Is that it?" His voice echoed off the marble walls. "You've seen it. You've heard the orders. You've reviewed the survivors. So what? Nothing? No statements? No condemnation? Still no answer. He turned, sweeping his gaze across the chamber. They weren't soldiers. They weren't criminals. They were a diplomatic envoy, and you tried to bury them like trash. Nothing. Nico stepped beside him, scanning the room. Then his eyes flicked to the lower terminals surrounding the floor. One by one, the active transmission indicators blinked off. He frowned. "They're cutting outgoing channels," he murmured, locking the logs, encrypting the session feed. "They're trying to control the narrative." Lena folded her arms, her eyes scanning the room with icy precision. "They knew before we arrived." Ewan clenched his fists. He turned toward the high dais, locking eyes with Rentalix. "You already knew." The council president didn't flinch. He leaned forward slightly but said nothing. Then a soft chime echoed through the chamber. A single golden light flashed above the council seal. Session terminated. The chamber's glow dimmed. The projection field vanished, and the guards moved. Not toward the humans in aggression, just protocol. Escorts, closing the room, ending the moment. Ewan didn't move immediately. He stared upward at the now dark platform, where Talek sat in silence. The rest of the council had begun to turn inward, whispering, conferring behind closed filters and neural masks. Only the humans stood still. The guards gestured. They walked. Out of the chamber, down the long hall of polished alloy and ancient stone. No words were exchanged until the corridor turned away from the council gates. Then Nico spoke, his voice low, hollow. "They knew." Lena didn't answer. She didn't need to. Ewan paused, just for a moment. At the edge of the corridor, where the light dimmed and the whispers of the council could no longer reach, he turned his head back toward the room he had just left. His voice was calm, quiet, deadly. "This isn't over." Rentalix didn't answer, but Ewan could still feel the weight of his gaze, watching, calculating, waiting. "Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. Hope you had a great time with the story. Remember to hit the like and subscribe buttons. It really makes a huge difference to the channel. And hey, I've got something else for you. I've chosen another story that I think you'll really enjoy. Just click the card right here, or hit this one to jump into the full playlist. See you in the next one.